Welcome to Startup Health TV, where we celebrate the entrepreneurs and innovators who are transforming health. I'm your host, Logan Plaster, and it's my pleasure to be here with Adam Graybill, CEO and co-founder at Journey Biosciences. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Logan. This is really great.
So, you have come up with a novel way to detect kidney disease for people with diabetes, correct? Tell me exactly what you've built.
Yeah, so I think the key word here is really we predict in advance of any clinical signs and symptoms. So really what we've identified and developed is a diagnostic for once you have a diabetes diagnosis that ultimately we can pull a blood sample that's a similar size of what's used for an A1C, which is a common test with diabetes. And with that, we measure specific biomarkers up to 12 years in advance of any clinical signs and symptoms.
Now hold on. 12 years pre-clinical signs and symptoms. How is that possible?
It's possible through the technology and genetics. So my partner and co-founder is Dr. Paul Bleiswinger from Dartmouth, and he spent the bulk of his career trying and passionately working to help people with diabetes. And so this is his big contribution right now.
And he cracked the code.
He cracked the code.
He figured it out, okay.
So he spent in the neighborhood of about 30 years researching this area, and ultimately now we're proud to bring it to the diabetes community and to healthcare professionals around the world.
How did you get into this?
Yeah, so I met Paul about 3 years ago. Ironically, was introduced to him through a type 1 family that I had helped, and they met Paul and understood what he had identified. And so as you kind of look up saying, hey, how do you bring a new science and technology and discovery to the world? That's where I came in. So my past was really building large diabetes businesses that serve, hundreds of thousands of people with type 1 and even more with type 2. So we're a match made in heaven.
So you had the right experience. You discover this novel concept. What are some of the unique challenges of bringing a biotech to market?
Yeah, so I think maybe not unique, but I think one of the things that we really focus on is, hey, how do we do this the right way? So regulatory and making sure that everything is clinically validated, the science is tight, our accuracy is something that people can depend on because we're giving people really tough news potentially if they're at risk for this.
Right.
It's a scary proposition. So I think regulatory accuracy, and I think ultimately the most important part of building any business is building a team that is really passionate about the space, cares about the diabetes community, and is ultimately going to weather the storm when it comes down to making sure that we help as many patients really across the globe as possible.
How do people act on this information? I know in other realms, sometimes you don't want to know the future too early. You know what I mean? Like philosophically?
Yes.
So how do people act on this information?
Yeah, so I think when we look at it, so part of this is about the clinical utility. So I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure before we introduce, we don't want to just give people bad news and then say, hey, great. Like from our standpoint, it's a situation is it needs to be actionable. So when somebody is identified at risk, when you think about it, it's again, you're creating that time window of 12 years of where they, like the patient and their clinical team, can start to take action. So when we go through of like, okay, what are the common things that are going to happen and what needs to be emphasized or prioritized, it's leveraging technologies and therapeutics and services that are available today, things like CGM. Okay. So time and range of managing that glucose variability is so critical to ultimately reducing kind of the risk and also kind of delaying progression to kidney disease.
Okay, just in terms of how it works, if I take the test, which I think is NaviDKD, right?
Correct.
I take that test and I discover my risk profile for 10 years out, okay? Is it like a numeric score that I'm going to be tracking over time?
Well, so it's if you're at risk, so let's just say I'm a patient that's at risk, we're going to look at it and say, here's what the risk level is. We provide a percentile of where they fit in the perspective. And the higher the risk is, the more rapid the progression is going to be. So that's kind of the cue for both the patient and the clinician to really get intensive and really focused on doing the right things.
And do I keep testing and I can watch that come down if I'm successful?
Yeah, so one of the things we're looking and recommending is that at-risk population is every year they're getting the test done. For the patients, the great news for the patients that are maybe at low risk is you're looking at every 3 or 5 years, because ultimately they should feel comfortable that, hey, they have a genetic safety to kidney disease and they can manage their diabetes still aggressively because there's other complications and other issues.
Interesting.
But ultimately, the goal is how do we prevent and delay progression to kidney disease?
Interesting. Now, to shift gears a little bit, you're part of our T1D Moonshot community, and you've been a model member. You've really stepped up to collaborate and mentor others and participate. So from your perspective, why is it beneficial to have a more collaborative group thinking about type 1 diabetes?
So at its core, diabetes is a community. So when I think about community, it's one of these things where, and we just think about a patient or a person with diabetes, is every single decision that they make is critical. And especially for a type 1 where
every day
there's a life and death consequence to bad decisions. That's an unrealistic expectation on a patient. So really when we talk about community, it's a situation where how do you have, people that are advocating for you, clinicians that are kind of tied in and understand insurances that care about ultimately your clinical outcomes. And obviously providers like ourselves that are innovating and introducing new technologies. So it really takes that whole ecosystem to really make a difference and start to kind of shift the future of care.
What are you excited about the next year for Journey?
So for Journey, key things from our standpoint, our reimbursement kicks in January of 2024.
Okay.
So what that means is really we become, I don't want to say it's a subsidized, so patients don't have to come out of pocket for it. We have great conversations with health insurance companies really across the country. And we've also, I think the other key thing is we'll be launching some clinical pilots with some really influential health systems here in the U.S. That we think are going to be transformative in terms of like our career trajectory.
So you feel like that January shift, that regulatory shift is going to be transformative for the company?
Oh, absolutely. I think anytime you go from like a cash pay model or trying to figure out how to support patients to where it's reimbursed by federal government, state governments, and commercial insurances, it's an absolute game changer in terms of the ability to scale and grow your business.
How novel is this test in the market?
So when we think about, the short answer is we're proprietary, we're the first to market in a predictive screening for people with diabetes. When we think about the standard of care, is really the emphasis has been on diagnosing disease and injury that already exists.
Yeah.
I think where we start to kind of look at it, and I don't want to use the term disrupt, but we're going to disrupt and kind of change the mold.
You can say it.
But we're really looking at how do we start to kind of think and look forward and really be in a spot of where we can predict and thereby preventable diseases.
Yeah. Push that decision making back, so that you can actually change your future.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not about the future that is set in stone. It's about the future that may be that you can still have an impact on.
We often talk about, the current kind of model is, you're diagnosing and you're reacting and you're treating. Where we really look at this is it really becomes about predict and prevent.
Wow. Awesome. Adam, it's great to see what you're doing. It's inspiring to see the way that you are allowing people to think ahead about their health. And I also love just the way that you've collaborated and been a mentor in the T1D Moonshot community. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.